Meera Kapoor and Arjun Mehra seemed like the perfect couple, a young woman chasing her American dream and a charming entrepreneur promising love and security. But 74 days after she arrived in the U.S., Meera vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions, fear, and a chilling mystery that no one could have imagined. Meera Kapoor had always felt a restless pull toward the world beyond Jaipur. Growing up in a modest family, she had learned to dream quietly, sketching out a future filled with opportunities she had only read about in books. The bustling streets of her hometown, the colors of the markets, and the familiar warmth of her neighborhood were comforting, but Meera longed for something more. Her ambition was fueled by stories of women who had moved abroad and built lives filled with independence, adventure, and love. When she first received an online message from Arjun Mehra, a successful entrepreneur living in California, she was intrigued by his charm, sophistication, and apparent understanding of her dreams. Their conversations, first casual and polite, quickly became intimate and intense. Arjun spoke of a future together, painting vivid pictures of a life filled with love, travel, and security. He promised to care for her, to support her ambitions, and to make her feel valued in a way no one else had. Meera, whose family had always urged caution in matters of the heart, found herself swept away by the idea of a fresh start in a foreign land with someone who seemed to understand her completely. Every late-night conversation deepened her belief that Arjun was her destiny. The thought of leaving her family, her friends, and the familiar streets of Jaipur was daunting, but the excitement of a new life outweighed her fears. She imagined the sunny streets of Los Angeles, the towering buildings, and the freedom that awaited her. With a mixture of anticipation and nervousness, Meera made the decision to trust Arjun, convinced that love and destiny had finally aligned to take her on the journey she had always dreamed of. Meera Kapoor stepped off the plane at Los Angeles International Airport, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The sprawling terminals, the chatter of travelers, and the unfamiliar scent of the city instantly reminded her that she was far from home. Arjun Mehra was waiting for her outside, holding a bouquet of flowers with a smile that seemed to promise warmth and protection. For a moment, Meera felt as if all her dreams had materialized. The distance, the uncertainty, and the sacrifices she had made seemed to vanish as she looked at him. The drive from the airport to his luxurious apartment in a quiet neighborhood was filled with sights she had only seen in movies. Wide roads lined with palm trees, sparkling cars, and tall buildings reflecting the bright afternoon sun. Meera couldn't help but feel a surge of hope and excitement for the life that awaited her. But as the first few days passed, small cracks in the perfect image began to show. Arjun was charming and attentive in public, but at home, he sometimes grew impatient, his words sharp and his moods unpredictable. Meera noticed how he guarded his phone and his laptop, often slipping away for mysterious calls or meetings that he refused to explain. Friends he introduced her to seemed polite but distant, and Meera often found herself feeling isolated despite the opulence around her. The freedom she had imagined came with an invisible pressure. She had to adjust to a new culture, navigate unfamiliar streets, and maintain a careful balance in a relationship that now felt unpredictable. At night, when the city lights glimmered outside the apartment window, Meera lay awake, wondering if the excitement of her American dream was real, or if it had a darker side she had not yet discovered. Meera's new life in Los Angeles began to feel like a dream to outsiders. Arjun's charm and apparent success made them the center of attention in social gatherings, and Meera often felt proud to be seen by his side. Friends complimented her on her new lifestyle, from designer clothes to extravagant dinners, and she began to feel a sense of accomplishment in leaving behind her modest life in Jaipur. Arjun made every effort to ensure she appeared happy, taking her to luxury stores, fine restaurants, and weekend trips along the coast. But behind the smiles and glittering events, Meera noticed unsettling patterns that she could not ignore. Arjun's attention could suddenly shift from warmth to coldness, his laughter replaced by a tense silence that left her anxious and unsure. Phone calls from her family in India were often interrupted or cut short, leaving her with a gnawing worry she couldn't shake. She noticed how Arjun guarded his personal space, his laptop and phone hidden under lock and key, even as he insisted their life together was perfect. At parties, people seemed drawn to him, but she sometimes caught glances filled with unease or subtle judgment. Meera tried to brush off the small warning signs, convincing herself that adjusting to a new country and culture was difficult and that Arjun's behavior was normal. Yet, deep down, a feeling of isolation began to settle in. She was far from home, surrounded by strangers, and reliant on someone who sometimes seemed unpredictable. The glitter of her American dream was starting to tarnish, replaced by a quiet unease. Every day, Meera wondered if the life she had fought so hard to reach was truly what she had imagined, or if it was something far more complicated and dangerous than she had ever anticipated. By the 50th day of her new life, Meera began to notice things she could no longer ignore. One afternoon, while checking her online banking account, she froze at the sight of several large withdrawals she did not recognize. Panic rose in her chest as she tried to make sense of the numbers, each transaction pointing to purchases and transfers she had never authorized. Confronting Arjun about it brought no answers, only sharp words and accusations that she was overreacting. His calm exterior now seemed brittle, hiding something deeper that Meera could not yet name. The sense of unease she had tried to dismiss in the early weeks grew heavier each day. Her phone, which she had always relied on to stay connected with her family, occasionally disappeared for hours at a time, leaving her isolated and anxious. She began to notice subtle patterns. Certain doors locked more tightly, messages deleted before she could read them, and unexplained trips that Arjun took without explanation. Friends she had met in the neighborhood began to offer small, hesitant warnings, their eyes filled with concern when Arjun was around. Meera tried to convince herself it was all part of adjusting to life in a new country, but an undercurrent of fear had begun to settle in her chest. The excitement of freedom she had imagined on the plane from Jaipur now felt distant, replaced by a tightening sense of being watched, monitored, and controlled. She began to question her own instincts, wondering if she had been naive, trusting too easily. Every detail of her surroundings seemed to carry hidden meaning, every quiet moment filled with suspense. What had once felt like a dream of love and adventure was now becoming a quiet nightmare, one that Meera feared she might not be able to escape. On the 74th day of her new life, Meera left the apartment early in the morning for a routine grocery trip, her mind focused on simple tasks and errands. She wore her favorite scarf, thinking it would brighten the otherwise ordinary day, unaware that this would be the last time anyone would see her in public. Hours passed, then an entire day, and Meera had not returned. Arjun appeared composed when questioned by neighbors and acquaintances, insisting that she had likely taken a longer walk than usual or was running errands elsewhere. His calmness, meant to reassure others, only heightened the anxiety of those who knew Meera. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and messages were left without reply, deepening the growing worry. Police were contacted, and the investigation began, but Arjun maintained the same confident narrative. Meera had left voluntarily and would return when she wished. Those who knew her could not reconcile this explanation with the Meera they had come to admire, a young woman who was careful, connected to her family, and cautious in her decisions. Inside the apartment, her belongings were still neatly arranged, as if she had stepped out briefly and planned to return, leaving no hint of permanent departure. Friends and family in India grew frantic, desperate for news, while the authorities struggled with conflicting statements and a lack of concrete evidence. The sense of dread began to settle like a shadow over the neighborhood, leaving neighbors whispering about the strange disappearance. Each unanswered call and every empty hour amplified the fear that something far more sinister had occurred. Meera's bright hopes for a new life seemed to hang in uncertainty, a puzzle with missing pieces, as the question of her fate grew more urgent and haunting with every passing moment. The investigation into Meera's disappearance began almost immediately, but progress was slow. Detective Emily Ross was assigned to the case, a seasoned investigator known for her persistence and sharp instincts. From the very beginning, she sensed that something about Arjun's calm demeanor did not add up. His carefully crafted narrative seemed rehearsed, too perfect to be true, and small inconsistencies in his statements raised immediate red flags. Meera's apartment became a focal point for the investigation. It was pristine, with everything in its place, as if she had planned a brief outing rather than vanishing without a trace. Personal items, her wallet, phone charger, and favorite books, remained untouched, heightening suspicions that her disappearance was not voluntary. Security footage from nearby streets showed her walking toward the grocery store that morning, but there were no clear images of her leaving the area afterward. Every lead seemed to circle back to Arjun, whose behavior during interviews alternated between composed and subtly defensive. Detective Ross noticed how he avoided eye contact when specific questions were asked, and how quickly he deflected conversations to trivial topics. Friends and neighbors were questioned repeatedly, providing fragments of information: a sudden argument overheard, a locked room no one could access, and unusual visitors arriving at the apartment. Each detail added to the growing sense that Meera's disappearance involved premeditation. Ross began to piece together a timeline, comparing phone records, bank statements, and surveillance footage. The puzzle was complex, but one fact became increasingly clear: someone close to Meera knew more than they were revealing. The investigation moved from cautious inquiries to focused scrutiny, with every small discovery intensifying the urgency to uncover the truth about what had truly happened to Meera Kapoor in the bright, bustling city she had once imagined as the start of her DR. As Detective Ross dug deeper into Arjun Meera's past, a troubling pattern began to emerge. At first glance, he appeared to be the ideal partner: successful, ambitious, and well-connected. But beneath the polished surface, his history told a different story. Former business associates described failed ventures and suspicious financial dealings, often ending in abrupt closures or unexplained losses. Some had quietly withdrawn support after noticing inconsistencies in his statements, while others hinted at his tendency to manipulate situations to his advantage. More unsettling were the whispers from people who had known him personally, women who had vanished from his life under unclear circumstances, leaving behind unanswered questions and uneasy suspicions. No official charges had ever been filed, but the accounts painted a portrait of someone capable of controlling and deceiving those around him. Friends of Meera began recalling odd remarks he had made early in their acquaintance, subtle comments that now seemed ominous in retrospect. Every story, every anecdote added layers to the mystery, revealing a man who was skilled at masking a darker personality behind charm and charisma. Detective Ross realized that Meera had walked into a world carefully orchestrated by someone with a history of manipulation. The luxurious apartment, the carefully timed gestures of affection, the constant social appearances, all of it now seemed like a meticulously designed facade. Ross compiled records of Arjun's past relationships, business dealings, and movements, noting any anomalies or gaps that could provide clues. It became increasingly clear that the investigation was not simply about a young woman who had gone missing. It was about uncovering the hidden patterns of a man who had woven deceit into every aspect of his life. Each revelation intensified the urgency to find Meera, whose fate was becoming more uncertain by the day. A breakthrough in the case came when Detective Ross obtained phone records that revealed Arjun Meera had made repeated calls to a private storage facility on the very day Meera disappeared. The pattern of calls suggested more than casual business. They were precise, deliberate, and frequent, raising immediate suspicion. Ross obtained surveillance footage from the facility, which captured Arjun arriving alone, carrying several large, heavy bags. The images were grainy but unmistakable. He moved quickly, almost nervously, yet with a confidence that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. Investigators immediately obtained a warrant to search the facility, and what they discovered inside sent shockwaves through the team. Among the stored items were personal belongings belonging to Meera, her favorite scarf, a partially packed suitcase, and other intimate items she would never have left behind voluntarily. The realization struck the investigators like a blow. The disappearance was no accident, and the evidence left little room for doubt about Arjun's involvement. Forensic experts were called in to analyze the items, and traces of Meera's DNA confirmed that she had indeed been in that location. This evidence transformed the investigation from a case of a missing person into a criminal inquiry with clear intent. Every layer of Arjun's carefully constructed life began to unravel as detectives pieced together a timeline of his movements, communications, and activities surrounding the disappearance. The more the investigators uncovered, the more it became apparent that Arjun had meticulously planned Meera's abduction, hiding key evidence to mislead anyone who might suspect him. Each discovery added weight to the growing understanding that Meera's disappearance was part of a deliberate and chilling plan, and that the man she had trusted most could be the architect of her unseen fate. The arrest of Arjun Meera marked a turning point in the investigation, but it also revealed just how calculated his actions had been. When law enforcement officials arrived at his apartment, he was composed, almost unnervingly so, as if expecting the arrival of the authorities. Once in custody, the layers of his deception began to unfold. Investigators discovered emails and messages in which Arjun had discussed plans to cover his tracks, detailing contingencies in case anyone became suspicious of Meera's sudden disappearance. These communications, combined with financial records and phone logs, painted a chilling picture of premeditation. Every step he had taken, from orchestrating a flawless image of a caring partner to controlling access to her communications, was designed to manipulate perception and maintain control. The private storage facility, where Meera's personal belongings had been found, became central to the case. Forensic teams worked tirelessly, confirming the presence of her DNA and reconstructing the timeline of Arjun's movements leading up to and following her disappearance. The investigation revealed that what had seemed like a whirlwind romance was, in reality, a carefully calculated trap. As evidence mounted, Arjun's confident facade began to crack. Each confrontation with detectives brought subtle shifts in his demeanor, from irritation to an almost imperceptible panic. For Detective Ross and the team, the arrest was just the beginning. Piecing together the full scope of his plans and motives became their priority. The chilling reality set in. Meera had been ensnared in a life-threatening situation from the moment she stepped off the plane. The arrest confirmed suspicions that had haunted the investigators from the start, but it also left a haunting question unresolved. What had truly happened to Meera after she vanished? And would the full truth ever be uncovered? Despite overwhelming evidence against Arjun Meera, the fate of Meera Kapoor remained a haunting mystery. His trial was high-profile, drawing attention from both local media and the community that had watched the case unfold with growing anxiety. Prosecutors presented a detailed account of his history of manipulation, the evidence from the storage facility, and the incriminating communications that revealed premeditation. Yet, even as the courtroom drama unfolded, the absence of Meera's body left a gaping void. Her family, desperate for closure, attended each hearing, holding on to the hope that some new detail might finally lead them to her. Witnesses testified about Arjun's controlling behavior, the sudden changes in Meera's routine, and the small warning signs that, in hindsight, had been impossible to ignore. The jury listened, increasingly convinced that Arjun had orchestrated every moment leading up to her disappearance. Ultimately, he was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison, ensuring he would never harm another person. But the lack of physical evidence of Meera herself left an unsettling emptiness. The questions of her final moments, where she was taken, and whether she had survived lingered like a shadow over the case. The community struggled to process the chilling reality. A life full of promise and dreams had been shattered in an instant. Meera's story became more than just a cautionary tale. It was a sobering reminder of how easily appearances can deceive and how quickly trust can be exploited. Her disappearance sparked discussions about safety, online relationships, and the vulnerabilities faced by those who leave everything familiar in search of a better life. Though justice had been served in a legal sense, the emotional wound remained. Meera's fate, her lost dreams, and the terrifying circumstances of her vanishing continued to haunt all who had followed her story, a chilling testament to the hidden darkness that can lurk behind a sea.